The emergency room doors burst open at 2:47 a.m., and Ethan Cole looked up from his mother's bedside to see the last person he ever expected. Victoria Hale, still wearing her designer dress from whatever gala she'd abandoned, clutching a folder of medical bills he'd never shown anyone. "I paid them," she said, breathless. "All of them." His hands shook as he stood. "Get out!" It was the third time he'd rejected the richest woman in the city, but this time something in her eyes told him she wasn't leaving. This is the story of a single-father bartender who said no to a billionaire 3 times, and the woman who loved him enough to hear it. Stay until the end to see how rejection became the foundation of something real. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The glass shattered against the bar mat with a sound Ethan Cole had learned to ignore, sharp, final, and quickly forgotten. He swept the shards into the bin without looking up, his hands moving with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd cleaned up 1,000 broken things and knew he'd clean up 1,000 more. It was Thursday night at the Meridian, which meant the downtown crowd. Investment bankers loosening ties, tech executives celebrating acquisitions, and trust fund kids pretending the weight of their parents' money didn't crush them in different ways. Ethan had been tending bar for 3 years, and he'd developed a specific talent for invisibility. He mixed drinks, nodded at appropriate intervals, and collected tips without ever becoming memorable. It was a survival skill he'd perfected after his wife died, after Sarah's funeral, after the life insurance that didn't cover half what they'd hoped, after he'd realized he was 28 years old with a 6-year-old daughter and a mother dying slowly in County General. "Another scotch," the man in the custom suit demanded, not requested. Ethan poured without comment. The clock above the liquor display read 10:17 p.m. In approximately 4 hours, his shift would end. He'd drive straight to the hospital for the 30 minutes visiting hours allowed before dawn, sit with his mother while she slept, then get home in time to wake Maya for school. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Mrs. Chen from downstairs stayed over. It cost him $40 a night he didn't have, but the alternative was leaving a first grader alone, and Ethan had learned that some compromises weren't compromises at all. They were just the only options that let you sleep at night. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the ambient noise of the bar with unusual clarity. Not loud, but precise. Ethan glanced up. She sat alone at the far end of the bar, occupying the corner seat that usually stayed empty because it offered no view of the televisions and required walking past everyone else. Her dress probably cost more than Ethan made in 6 months. Black, simple in the way that screamed expensive, with a neckline that suggested rather than revealed. Her dark hair fell straight to her shoulders, and she watched him with the kind of direct attention that made the back of his neck prickle. Ethan recognized her immediately, the way everyone in the city would. Victoria Hale, heiress to the Hale Industries fortune, a woman whose quarterly stock dividends exceeded the GDP of small nations. He'd seen her face on magazine covers at grocery store checkout lines, usually accompanied by headlines about her love life, her fashion choices, or her latest business acquisition. "What can I get you?" Ethan kept his voice professionally neutral. "What do you recommend?" She tilted her head slightly, a gesture that might have been genuine curiosity or practiced charm. With people like her, Ethan had learned, it was impossible to tell. "Depends what you like." "Surprise me." She smiled, and Ethan felt something uncomfortable shift in his chest. Not attraction exactly, but recognition of it as a possibility, which was almost worse. He made her a French 75, mostly because it required enough steps that he could avoid conversation. Gin, lemon juice, simple syrup, champagne. He set it in front of her without ceremony. She took a sip, her expression shifting to something that looked like genuine appreciation. "That's perfect. What is it?" "French 75. "Are you always this talkative?" The question held amusement rather than offense. "I'm a bartender, not a conversationalist." Ethan moved to turn away, but her next word stopped him. "I've been watching you." Every instinct Ethan had developed in 3 years of service industry work screamed warning. He turned back slowly, his face carefully blank. "Can I get you something else?" "Have dinner with me." She said it simply, the way someone might say, "pass the salt," as though the answer was obvious, the outcome predetermined. Ethan blinked, processed, responded. "No." Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, so briefly he might have imagined it. No? No, thank you, he amended, though politeness felt absurd given the situation. Can I ask why? There was genuine confusion in her voice now, and Ethan realized with a strange mix of satisfaction and pity that she actually didn't understand rejection as a concept that applied to her. I don't date customers. It was easier than the truth. I'm not really a customer. This is my first time here. She gestured around the meridian as though its polished wood and brass fixtures were charming rather than standard. I came specifically to meet you. The prickle on Ethan's neck intensified into something closer to alarm. Why? Because 3 weeks ago, I saw you at County General Hospital. She said it quietly, without the triumph of someone playing a winning card. You were sitting in the waiting room at 4 in the morning, wearing your work clothes, reading a police procedural textbook. When they called you back, you spent exactly 28 minutes with a patient in the cancer ward, then left and went straight to an apartment in Riverside. 6 hours later, you walked a little girl to Edison Elementary, then went to class at the community college. You're in your 3rd year of criminal justice, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working 50 hours a week and raising a daughter alone. Your mother has stage 4 lung cancer, you haven't taken a day off in 8 months, and despite all of that, you say please and thank you to everyone you meet. Ethan's hands had gone completely still. The noise of the bar faded to something distant and irrelevant. When he finally spoke, his voice came out harder than he'd intended. You had me investigated. Yes. No apology, no justification, just acknowledgement. That's insane. He turned away, began wiping down the already clean bar top with enough force that the wood might splinter. That's genuinely insane behavior. Probably. She took another sip of her drink. But I wanted to know if what I saw that night was real. What you saw... Ethan stopped, forced himself to breathe. Lady, I don't know what you think you saw, but I'm not interested. I'm not available. And I'm definitely not whatever project or entertainment you're looking for. I'm not looking for a project. Her voice had shifted now, lost some of its practiced smoothness. I'm looking for someone who doesn't want anything from me. Then you came to the wrong place because I want you to leave me alone. Ethan walked to the other end of the bar, served 3 more customers, and didn't look in her direction for the next hour. When he finally glanced back at her corner seat, she was gone. The $100 bill she'd left covered a $20 drink. He pocketed the tip because he needed it more than he needed pride, and hated himself for approximately 30 seconds before the feeling passed into the same numbness that carried him through most days. The thing about exhaustion, Ethan had learned, was that it became normal. The human body adapted to almost anything given enough time. Sleep deprivation, grief, the particular emptiness of coming home to an apartment that used to hold a family and now just held furniture. By the time he pulled into the hospital parking lot at 2:34 a.m., he'd been awake for 19 hours, and it felt like every other Thursday. County General's night shift security guard, Marcus, nodded him through without checking ID anymore. The elevator to the 4th floor, the left turn at the nurse's station, room 447. His mother's room smelled like disinfectant and the flowers someone from her church had brought 3 days ago, already wilting. She was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady. The machines around her bed beeped their regular rhythms, a sound Ethan had grown so accustomed to that silence now felt wrong. He sat in the chair he'd sat in countless times before, opened his textbook to Chapter 12, Criminal Investigation Procedures, and tried to focus on words that kept rearranging themselves into meaningless shapes. You look tired, baby. His mother's voice, raspy from the oxygen tube, startled him. Her eyes were open, reflecting the dim light from the hallway. I'm fine, Mom. Go back to sleep. Can't sleep. Too much sleeping already. She smiled weakly. Tell me about Maya. She's good. Lost another tooth, got an A on her spelling test. Ethan closed the textbook. She drew you a picture. It's a horse, or possibly a dog. She insists it's you, which I think we should both find insulting. His mother's laugh turned into a cough that lasted 30 seconds and aged Ethan 30 years. When it finally subsided, she reached for his hand. Her fingers felt like paper and bone. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't. Ethan's throat tightened. Don't do that. I'm sorry you have to carry all this alone. I'm not alone, I have you. The lie sat between them, comfortable in its familiarity. They both knew the truth, the mounting medical bills, the experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover, the fact that every specialist they'd seen had used the word palliative with increasing frequency. You need to let people help you. Her eyes, still sharp despite everything, fixed on his face. You need to let people in. I'm fine. You're 28 and you look 40. You're working yourself to death, and for what? So you can be alone and exhausted instead of just alone? Mom, I'm dying, Ethan. I can say these things. She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. Promise me something. Promise me that when someone offers you kindness, you won't assume it's pity. Promise me you'll let yourself want things again. Ethan wanted to argue, but the machines around them beeped their steady rhythm, marking time he didn't have. I promise, he lied, because sometimes love meant telling your dying mother what she needed to hear. He stayed until the nurse's gentle knock told him visiting hours were over, then drove home through streets empty enough that traffic lights felt like suggestions. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch when he got home, and he paid her in cash he'd withdrawn specifically for this purpose, the $100 tip from Victoria Hale already allocated to this week's utilities. Maya was asleep in her bed, clutching the stuffed elephant Sarah had given her 3 years ago, its fur matted from being loved too hard. Ethan stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, and felt the familiar weight settle across his shoulders, the responsibility, the fear, the fierce protective love that made everything else bearable. He collapsed into bed at 4:15 a.m. and set his alarm for 6:30. 2 hours and 15 minutes of sleep. It would have to be enough. Victoria Hale appeared again on Saturday. Ethan was leaving his morning class, criminal psychology, a subject he found both fascinating and depressing, when he saw her standing next to his car. Same expensive simplicity to her clothes, different dress. She held 2 coffee cups and what looked like genuine nervousness. Before you tell me to leave, she said quickly, I want to apologize. Having you investigated was invasive and wrong. I would hate it if someone did that to me, and I shouldn't have done it to you. Ethan stopped about 10 feet away, his backpack heavy with textbooks he'd bought used from the college bookstore. Okay. Okay? She blinked. Apology accepted. Now please leave me alone. He moved toward his car, but she stepped into his path. I can't. Sure you can? It's easy. You walk away, get into whatever absurdly expensive car you drove here, and forget I exist. Ethan's patience, already worn thin by lack of sleep and a particularly brutal lecture on victimology, was fraying rapidly. I don't want to forget you exist. She held out one of the coffee cups. This is for you. Black, no sugar. I guessed based on... She caught herself. I guessed. Ethan didn't take the coffee. What do you want from me? I want to take you to dinner. I want to have a conversation that doesn't end with you telling me to leave. I want... She paused, and for a moment, the polished exterior cracked enough that Ethan saw something raw underneath. I want to know someone who looks at me and doesn't see a bank account. You think I'm that person? Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lady, you paid to have my life dissected. You know exactly how much I need money. You know about my mother, my daughter, my 15-year-old car that needs a new transmission I can't afford. You're not looking for someone who doesn't see your money. You're looking for someone desperate enough to pretend they don't. The words landed like physical blows. Victoria flinched, her expression shifting through several emotions too quickly to track. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. You're wrong. Am I? Ethan moved past her toward his car. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a bored rich person looking for something real in all the wrong places. And I don't have time for that. I don't have time for anything that isn't keeping my family alive and my daughter fed. I know. Victoria didn't follow him, but her voice carried. I know you don't have time, but I'm asking for it anyway because I think you're exactly the kind of person who deserves someone to ask. Ethan stopped with his hand on the car door. Against every instinct, against every reasonable thought screaming in his head, he turned back. One dinner. Hope flashed across her face. Really? One dinner, and then you leave me alone. Deal. Deal. She smiled, genuine and bright, and Ethan felt the ground shift slightly under his feet. Not dramatically, not life-changingly, but enough to notice. Friday night, 7 o'clock. There's a diner on 5th and Morrison called Mel's. Meet me there. He got into his car before she could respond, before he could change his mind, before the weight of what he just agreed to could fully settle. As he drove away, he checked the rearview mirror and saw her still standing in the parking lot, holding both coffee cups, looking like someone who just won something she hadn't expected to want. The week passed in its usual blur of exhaustion and obligation. Ethan worked 4 shifts at the Meridian, attended 3 classes, spent 6 hours total at the hospital, helped Maya with homework, did laundry, grocery shopping, and paid bills he could barely afford. Wednesday night, his mother's doctor called with news about a new treatment protocol that might extend her life by 6 months, possibly a year. It would cost $40,000 that insurance classified as experimental and therefore not covered. Ethan sat in his car in the hospital parking lot for 20 minutes after that conversation, staring at the steering wheel and doing math that didn't work no matter how many times he recalculated it. His savings account held $1,700. His credit cards were maxed. The community college offered some financial aid, but not the kind that covered experimental cancer treatments for parents. He thought about Victoria Hale's offer, dinner, conversation, the implicit promise of more. He thought about what it would mean to accept help from someone like her, to become the kind of person who solved problems with other people's money. The thought made him physically ill, but then again, so did the thought of his mother dying because he was too proud to ask. Friday arrived with the inexorable certainty of all deadlines. Ethan dropped Maya at his mother's neighbor's house, a retired teacher named Judith, who'd offered to babysit for free after hearing about his situation. He changed in the community college bathroom, trading his work clothes for the one decent shirt he owned, and arrived at Mel's Diner at 6:58 p.m. Victoria was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably still cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, but at least suggested effort at normalcy. She'd pulled her hair into a ponytail, and without the armor of her usual polished appearance, she looked younger, more uncertain. "You came," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. "I said I would. People say things they don't mean all the time." She pushed a menu across the table, though Ethan knew it by heart. He'd been coming to Mel's since college, back when Sarah was alive, and they'd split plates because money was tight, but love was abundant. A waitress Ethan didn't recognize appeared, took their orders, burger and fries for him, Greek salad for her, and disappeared with practiced efficiency. "So," Victoria said, folding her hands on the table, "tell me about yourself." "You already had me investigated. You probably know more about me than I remember about myself." "I know facts. I don't know you." She leaned forward slightly. "What made you want to be a detective?" Ethan considered deflecting, offering some sanitized version of the truth, but exhaustion made him honest. "My wife died in a hit and run 3 years ago. The driver was never found. The police were sympathetic, but it wasn't a priority. Wrong neighborhood, no witnesses, case went cold in 6 weeks. I realized that justice isn't automatic. Someone has to fight for it, and usually that someone needs to care enough to keep fighting when it gets hard. I want to be that person." Victoria's expression softened into something that looked like genuine empathy. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Me too." Ethan took a drink of water, washing down the familiar bitterness. "Your turn. Why are you really here?" "I told you." "No, you told me what you thought I wanted to hear. I'm asking what's true." He met her eyes across the table. "Someone with your resources doesn't need to chase down a bartender unless something's broken." "So what's broken?" For a long moment, Victoria didn't answer. Then slowly, her perfectly maintained composure began to crack. "Everything," she said quietly. "Everything's broken. I'm 26 years old, I'm worth $3 billion, and I can't remember the last time someone wanted to be in the same room with me because of who I am rather than what I have. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every friendship is conditional. Every man who asks me out has already calculated what I'm worth to his portfolio." "That sounds lonely." "It's suffocating." She looked down at her hands. 3 weeks ago, I was at the hospital because my PR team thought I should visit the children's cancer ward. Make a donation, take some photos, remind people that billionaires have hearts. I hated every second of it, but I went because that's what you do. And then I saw you in the waiting room, and you were so focused on that textbook that you didn't even notice me. You didn't care who I was. You didn't want anything from me. And for about 30 seconds, I felt invisible in the best possible way. Their food arrived, creating a pause that Ethan used to process everything she'd just said. When the waitress left, he picked up his burger but didn't eat. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Yes? I see someone who thinks loneliness is unique to rich people. Ethan set the burger down. You feel isolated because your money makes relationships complicated. I feel isolated because my lack of money makes relationships impossible. You can't trust people's motivations. I can't afford to waste time on people who won't understand why I canceled our date because my daughter got sick or my mother needed me. Neither of us wins. So we're both lonely. Victoria's smile was sad. That's something. It's not enough. Ethan finally took a bite of his burger, chewed, swallowed. You want honesty? Here it is. I can't afford to get involved with you. Not emotionally, not practically. My life is held together with duct tape and willpower. And one unexpected expense, one surprise hospital bill, one car repair, one anything will break me completely. I don't have room for complications. What if I told you I could help with your mother's treatment, then I'd tell you this dinner was a mistake. Ethan's voice hardened. I'm not a charity case. I don't need rescuing. Everyone needs help sometimes. Victoria reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that the intention was clear. Why is it noble when you help your mother, but shameful when someone helps you? Because she raised me. She earned it. You're a stranger who decided I'm an interesting project. You're not a project. Victoria pulled her hand back, frustration creeping into her voice. You're someone I want to know. Is that so impossible to believe? Yes. Ethan met her eyes. Because people like you don't want to know people like me. They want to feel good about knowing people like me. There's a difference. The silence that followed felt like something breaking. Victoria looked away, blinking rapidly, and Ethan realized with uncomfortable certainty that he'd made her cry. But she didn't cry. She took a breath, composed herself with visible effort, and when she looked back at him, her expression had shifted into something he couldn't quite read. You're right, she said. I came here with assumptions. I thought I could offer you something and you'd be grateful, and that gratitude would turn into affection, and I could have something real without having to risk anything myself. That was selfish and stupid, and I apologize. Ethan hadn't expected capitulation. He'd expected anger, defensiveness, maybe tears. Not this. Okay, but you're wrong about one thing. Victoria leaned forward again. I don't think you're a project. I think you're scared. I think you've been alone so long that you've convinced yourself it's strength instead of survival. And I think part of you wants to say yes to me, but you're too terrified of what happens if you let yourself want something for yourself instead of just for everyone else. The words hit harder than Ethan wanted to acknowledge. He stood up, throwing 2 20s on the table, enough to cover both meals because he wouldn't let her pay. This was a mistake. I'm sorry I wasted your time. Ethan. But he was already walking toward the door, past the other diners, out into the parking lot where his dying car waited. He made it halfway home before his hands stopped shaking. Prasam. The phone call came at 3:17 a.m. Ethan recognized the hospital's number before he answered, and his heart stopped for the 3 seconds it took to press the green button. Hello? Mr. Cole? This is County General. Your mother's condition has deteriorated. You should come now. The drive passed in a blur of empty streets and red lights he barely saw. Maya was still asleep at Judith's house. He'd call her in the morning, or whenever morning became something that mattered again. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt hostile at this hour, turning everyone's skin a shade of gray that matched Ethan's emotional state. His mother's room had acquired additional machines since his last visit, each one beeping or humming its particular note of crisis. She was awake, her eyes tracking him as he entered. Hey, Mom. Ethan tried to smile and failed completely. Don't look so scared, baby. I'm still here. Her voice was barely audible over the machines. The doctor said, I know what the doctor said. She reached for his hand. Sit down. I want to tell you something. Ethan sat, holding her hand as gently as he could, terrified of breaking something already so broken. I'm listening. I'm proud of you. Each word seemed to cost her. I'm proud of how you've handled everything. Losing Sarah, raising Maya alone, taking care of me. You've been so strong. I don't feel strong. Strong people never do. That's how you know it's real. She coughed, a wet sound that made the machine scream warnings. When she caught her breath, her eyes were fierce. But baby, you're going to break if you don't let someone carry some of this weight. And when you break, Maya loses you too. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're drowning. And there's someone trying to throw you a life preserver, and you keep pushing it away because you think drowning alone is noble. Her grip tightened. It's not noble, baby. It's just lonely. Ethan felt something crack in his chest, something that had been holding tight for 3 years. I don't know how to accept help. Start small. Say yes to someone. Say yes to kindness. Say yes to the possibility that maybe you deserve good things too. She closed her eyes, exhausted by the effort of speaking. Promise me. I can't promise. Promise me you'll try. Ethan sat in the darkness, listening to machines breathe for his mother, and made a promise he didn't know if he could keep. I'll try. She smiled, and then she slept, and Ethan stayed until dawn painted the windows gold and the night shift nurses changed to day. He called Judith to check on Maya, then called his boss to take a personal day, then sat in the hospital cafeteria drinking terrible coffee and staring at his phone. Victoria Hale's number sat in his recent calls. He'd saved it after their dinner without really deciding to, muscle memory of politeness overriding common sense. He typed 3 different messages, deleted them all, and finally settled on simplicity. I'm sorry about last night. You were right about some things. I was wrong about others. If you still want to talk, I'm willing to listen. The response came in less than a minute. Coffee? I know a place that's not a diner. Ethan smiled despite everything. When? Now. Send me your location. He did, and then he waited. And 23 minutes later, Victoria Hale walked into County General's cafeteria wearing yesterday's clothes and no makeup, her hair in a messy bun, looking more real than he'd ever seen her. She sat down across from him without asking, set a proper coffee cup in front of him, not cafeteria swill, but something from an actual coffee shop, and said, Is your mother okay? No. Ethan wrapped his hands around the cup, feeling its warmth. But she's alive. For now. I'm sorry. Me too. He met her eyes. About last night. About being an asshole. About assuming the worst. You weren't wrong to be cautious. Victoria took a sip of her own coffee. I came on too strong. I do that sometimes. Think I can solve problems with money and persistence. Can you? Usually? Usually, yes. People are surprisingly easy to convince when you have enough zeros in your bank account. She smiled sadly. But not you. I'm too stubborn for my own good. Ethan felt the exhaustion of the past hours settling into his bones. My mother thinks I'm drowning and too proud to grab the life preserver. Are you? Probably. He looked around the cafeteria, at the scattered nurses and doctors, at the families sleeping in chairs. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone help without becoming dependent on it, without losing myself. What if we figure it out together? Victoria set down her coffee. What if we start with friendship? No expectations, no obligations, just 2 people who are both lonely in different ways, trying to be less lonely. Friends. Ethan tested the word. It felt safer than the alternatives. Friends, Victoria confirmed. And friends help each other when help is needed. Not as charity, as friendship. Ethan wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed to protect himself, to maintain the walls he'd built. But his mother's voice echoed, Promise me you'll try. Okay, he said. Friends. Victoria's smile transformed her entire face, and Ethan felt the ground shift again, more noticeably this time. Not an earthquake, just a tremor. Just enough to know that something had changed, that the foundation he'd thought was solid was actually more fragile than he'd believed, just enough to be terrified of what came next. The friendship that followed was nothing like Ethan expected. Victoria started small, texts asking how his day went, never demanding immediate responses, never pushing when he didn't reply for hours. She showed up at the hospital on random Tuesday afternoons with actual good coffee and sandwiches from a place near her office, sitting quietly while he studied, asking nothing except occasionally whether he wanted to take a walk. She met Maya exactly once in those first 2 weeks, accidentally, when Ethan had to pick up his daughter from school early because of a scheduling conflict with Mrs. Chen. "Is that your girlfriend?" Maya had asked in the car afterward, her 6-year-old directness cutting through any pretense. "She's my friend," Ethan had answered, watching Victoria's sleek car disappear into downtown traffic. "She's pretty, and she smells like flowers." Maya swung her legs, her feet not quite reaching the floor. "I liked her. She talked to me like I'm a real person, not like how some grown-ups talk to kids." Ethan had filed that observation away, surprised by how much it mattered that Victoria had passed his daughter's informal character assessment. Maya had good instincts about people. Sarah used to say their daughter could spot phoniness at 50 paces. The following week, Ethan's car finally died. Not dramatically, but with the definitive mechanical wheeze of an engine that had given everything it had and simply had nothing left. It happened in the community college parking lot after his Thursday morning class, the transmission making sounds that his limited automotive knowledge recognized as terminal. He sat behind the wheel for a solid minute, doing the math he'd done 1,000 times before. Repair cost versus car value, new car payment versus current insurance, the bus schedule versus his work schedule versus Maya's school schedule versus hospital visiting hours. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. He was comprehensively screwed. His phone buzzed. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. "Lunch today? There's a food truck near campus that supposedly has amazing tacos." Ethan stared at the message, then at his dead car, then back at the message. He could call an Uber to the hospital, take the bus to work, figure out the rest later. Or he could do what his mother had asked him to try. "Car just died. Stuck at school. Rain check?" The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared immediately, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, "What if I pick you up? We can deal with the car, then get tacos. My treat." Every instinct screamed to decline. He typed 3 different polite refusals before his mother's voice echoed again. "Promise me you'll try." "Okay, but I'm buying tacos." She arrived in 15 minutes driving a black SUV that probably cost more than Ethan would make in 5 years. She didn't comment on his car's obvious state of death, didn't offer solutions or money or anything except, "I know a mechanic, he's honest, which is rare. Want me to call him?" "Sure." Ethan climbed into the passenger seat, hyper-aware of the leather interior and the new car smell. Victoria made the call on speaker while she drove. The mechanic, a man named Tony, who sounded like he'd been smoking 2 packs a day for 40 years, agreed to tow the car and take a look. "But I gotta be honest with you. If it's the transmission like you're saying, you're looking at $3,000–4,000 to fix. More than the car's worth, probably." "Just call me with the verdict," Ethan said, his stomach sinking. They found the taco truck parked near a construction site, serving workers in hard hats and students with backpacks. Victoria ordered in fluent Spanish, which surprised Ethan enough that she noticed. "My nanny growing up was from Oaxaca," she explained, handing him carnitas tacos wrapped in foil. "She taught me Spanish and how to cook, and basically everything my parents were too busy to teach me. Her name was Rosalinda, and she was more family than my actual family." They sat on a bench in a small park, eating tacos and watching college students hurry between classes. For a while, neither of them spoke, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria wiped salsa from her fingers with a napkin. "Depends on the question." "Why criminal justice? I mean, I know what you said about your wife, about wanting to be the person who fights, but there are lots of ways to fight. Why this specific way?" Ethan considered deflecting, but found he didn't want to. "When Sarah died, I was angry, furious at the driver, at the police for giving up, at the universe for being so randomly cruel. I wanted revenge, wanted someone to hurt the way I was hurting. I spent about 6 months in that headspace, just rage and grief feeding each other." He paused, remembering those dark months with uncomfortable clarity. "And then one night, Maya had a nightmare. She woke up screaming, and when I got to her room, she told me she'd dreamed that I'd disappeared like Mommy, that I'd gone away and never come back, and I realized that my anger wasn't hurting the person who killed Sarah. It was hurting my daughter." Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression open and attentive. So I had a choice, Ethan continued. I could stay angry, or I could channel that anger into something useful. I started researching criminal justice programs, talking to people in law enforcement, trying to understand the system that had failed Sarah. And I realized that the system doesn't fail because people don't care. It fails because there aren't enough people who care enough to work the unsolvable cases, to fight for victims who don't have anyone else fighting for them. I want to be that person, not for revenge, for purpose. That's remarkable. Victoria's voice was quiet. Most people would have just stayed angry. I didn't have that luxury. I had a daughter who needed me functional. Ethan finished his taco, crumpled the foil. What about you? What would you do if money wasn't a factor? Money is always a factor for me. That's the problem. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I inherited Hale Industries when I was 23. My father died, left me controlling interest in the company, and suddenly I was responsible for 12,000 employees, quarterly earnings, shareholder value. I didn't get to choose what I wanted to do. It chose me. But if you could choose... Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring at the students crossing the park. I'd teach, she said finally. It's literature, probably. I have a degree in comparative literature from Yale that I've never used for anything except sounding educated at cocktail parties. I love books. Love how stories can make you understand perspectives completely different from your own. I'd love to share that with students who actually want to learn, not just who want connections or recommendation letters. So why don't you? Because 12,000 people depend on the company for their livelihoods. Because walking away would tank the stock price and destroy retirement accounts. Because my father spent his entire life building something, and I'm the only one left to preserve it. She looked at Ethan. Sometimes responsibility isn't a choice. It's just what you're left with. Ethan understood that more than she probably realized. Yeah, I know that feeling. His phone rang. Tony the mechanic, with news Ethan had expected but still hit hard. Transmission's completely shot. I can replace it for $3,500, but honestly, that car's got maybe another year left in it, even with the new transmission. You'd be throwing good money after bad. What's a decent used car run these days? Ethan asked, already knowing he couldn't afford the answer. Something reliable? 8,000-10,000 if you're lucky, more if you want something that'll last. Ethan thanked him, hung up, and sat very still while his brain performed calculations that all ended in impossible. He had $1,700 in savings. His credit cards were maxed. A car loan would require proof of income he couldn't provide without jeopardizing his work-study financial aid. The bus system didn't run routes that would get him to work, school, the hospital, and Maya's school on any sane schedule. Let me help, Victoria said it quietly, without preamble. No. Ethan, no. He stood up, started walking back toward campus, heard Victoria following. I appreciate the offer, but no. This is exactly what I was talking about. Victoria's voice carried frustration now. You're drowning, and I'm offering you a life preserver, and you're refusing because of pride. It's not pride, it's self-preservation. Ethan stopped, turned to face her. If I let you buy me a car, what happens when I can't afford the insurance increase? Or the registration? Or when it needs maintenance I can't pay for? I become dependent on you, and then I'm not your friend. I'm your charity case, and we both resent it. So what's your plan? Walk everywhere? Take 3 buses to get to work? I'll figure it out. I always do. But even as he said it, Ethan knew how hollow it sounded. They stood in the park, at an impasse that felt like more than just a disagreement about a car. Victoria's phone buzzed repeatedly, messages she ignored, and Ethan wondered how many business crises she was neglecting to stand here arguing with a stubborn bartender. Finally, Victoria took a breath. What if we make a deal? What kind of deal? I loan you money for a car. Actual loan with a contract and interest and everything legal. You pay me back monthly, whatever you can afford. If you miss payments, we renegotiate terms. If you can't pay at all, we figure something out. But it's a loan, not a gift. Business transaction between friends. Ethan wanted to refuse on principle, but principle didn't get Maya to school or him to work. What's the interest rate? 2%? Victoria pulled out her phone, started typing. Below market, but not insulting. I'll have my lawyer draw up paperwork. Your lawyer? Ethan stopped, laughed despite himself. You have a lawyer on call for this? I have lawyers on call for everything. It's depressing, actually. She looked up from her phone. Is that a yes? Everything in Ethan resisted, but his mother's voice wouldn't let him walk away. I pay you back. Every cent. I don't care if it takes 10 years. Deal. Victoria extended her hand, formal and serious. Friends help friends. That's allowed. Ethan shook her hand, feeling like he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. But Maya needed to get to school, and he needed to get to work. And sometimes survival meant accepting help, even when it felt like failure. The car Victoria helped him find was a 6-year-old Honda Civic with 100,000 miles and a maintenance history that suggested the previous owner had actually cared about it. It cost $8,500. The loan paperwork arrived 3 days later, professionally drafted and surprisingly straightforward. Ethan signed it after reading every word twice, his signature feeling like both surrender and relief. He made his first payment the following week, $200 that left his bank account dangerously low, but felt necessary in ways that transcended logic. Victoria texted him a simple, received thank you, and nothing else, and Ethan appreciated the lack of ceremony. The car changed everything practically, but complicated everything emotionally. Suddenly his schedule worked again. Maya got to school on time. He made it to the hospital, to work, to class without the juggling act that had consumed his life. But every time he started the engine, he thought about Victoria, about the debt he owed, about the line between friendship and dependence that felt increasingly blurred. They fell into a routine over the next month that felt almost normal. Coffee twice a week, usually at the hospital cafeteria because it was halfway between her office and his life. Occasional texts about nothing important, articles she thought he'd find interesting, questions about criminal justice that she claimed were curiosity but felt like genuine engagement with his world. She never pushed for more than he offered, never demanded time he didn't have, never made him feel obligated beyond the simple pleasure of her company. Maya met her twice more, accidental encounters that stopped being accidental when Ethan realized Victoria had memorized his schedule. His daughter, with the straightforward assessment of children, declared Victoria nice but sad. Why do you think she's sad? Ethan asked during dinner one night, watching Maya arrange her chicken nuggets into geometric patterns. Because she smiles wrong sometimes, like when you smile at me when you're worried but don't want me to know. Maya bit a nugget, chewed thoughtfully. Her smiles don't reach her eyes unless she's talking to you. Then they're real. Ethan filed that observation away too, unsettled by how much his 6-year-old noticed. His mother's condition stabilized into what the doctors called maintenance. Not improving, but not actively dying. A liminal space that felt like holding breath forever. The new treatment protocol Victoria had somehow heard about and mentioned to his mother's doctor was working, extending prognosis from months to potentially years. Ethan didn't ask how Victoria knew about experimental treatments, or why his mother's doctor suddenly had access to drugs that insurance wouldn't cover. He suspected he knew the answer, and wasn't sure he wanted confirmation. You look less exhausted, his mother said one afternoon, her voice stronger than it had been in months. What changed? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Ethan sat in his usual chair, criminal psychology textbook open but ignored. I let someone help me. You were right about that. The girl with the sad eyes? His mother smiled. She came by last week when you weren't here. Brought flowers, sat with me for an hour. Didn't say much, just kept me company. Ethan's heart did something complicated. She didn't mention that. I asked her not to, told her you'd feel obligated if you knew. His mother reached for the water cup and Ethan helped her drink. She's in love with you, you know. Mom, not might be, is. I've been watching people fall in love for 60 years. I know what it looks like. She set the cup down carefully. Question is whether you're going to let yourself love her back. It's complicated. Love is always complicated. That's not a reason to run from it. His mother's eyes, still sharp despite everything, fixed on his face. She's good for you. You're lighter when you talk about her. That's worth something. Ethan didn't know how to argue with that, so he didn't. He stayed until visiting hours ended, drove home in the car Victoria had made possible, and tried not to think about what his mother had seen that he was still refusing to acknowledge. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in late October. Ethan was working the closing shift at the Meridian when a group of investment bankers got aggressive about last call. He'd dealt with drunk, entitled men 1,000 times, had perfected the art of firmly refusing service without escalating conflict. But these particular men had been celebrating something significant and drinking accordingly, and when Ethan cut them off at 1:45 a.m., one of them decided to make it personal. "You know who I am?" The man leaned across the bar, expensive watch glinting. "You know how much money I spend here?" "Doesn't matter, bar's closed." Ethan started washing glasses, a technique he'd learned for ending conversations. "I want another scotch. Pour it, or I'll have your job. Then you'll have to talk to my manager tomorrow. Tonight, I'm done serving you." Ethan didn't look up, didn't engage, just kept washing. The man grabbed Ethan's wrist hard enough to hurt, hard enough that the glass Ethan was holding shattered against the sink. "I said pour the fucking drink." What happened next occurred in the compressed time of adrenaline and training Ethan had absorbed from 3 years of criminal justice courses. He twisted his wrist free, using a basic defensive technique, stepped back to create distance, and said calmly, "Sir, I need you to leave now, or I'm calling the police." The man lunged across the bar. Ethan sidestepped, muscle memory from a self-defense elective taking over, and the man crashed into the liquor display behind where Ethan had been standing. Bottles shattered, expensive alcohol mixing with broken glass, and suddenly the man's friends were involved, and security was there. And the whole situation spiraled from tense to catastrophic in under 30 seconds. The police arrived, took statements, determined Ethan had acted in self-defense. The drunk banker got arrested for assault and property damage. Ethan's manager, a perpetually exhausted woman named Sandra, who'd worked at the Meridian for 15 years, looked at the destroyed liquor display and said, "You're not in trouble, but you're going to have to give a statement downtown tomorrow. Insurance thing." Ethan got home at 4 a.m., adrenaline crash hitting him hard enough that his hands shook, opening his apartment door. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch again. He'd had to call her at midnight when the situation started deteriorating, asking her to stay over. He paid her double, apologized profusely, and collapsed onto his bed without undressing. His phone buzzed at 6:30 a.m. Maya's alarm, school morning. Ethan dragged himself vertical through sheer force of will, made breakfast on autopilot, got his daughter ready while his brain felt packed with cotton. "Daddy, you look sick." Maya touched his face with sticky fingers, her expression worried. "Just tired, baby. Rough night at work." He managed to smile, "But I'm fine." He dropped her at school, drove to the police station to give his statement, and answered the same question 17 different ways for 45 minutes. By the time he got back to his car, exhaustion had progressed beyond physical into something that felt like his bones were dissolving. Victoria called at 10:47 a.m. "Are you okay? I heard about last night." "How did you—" Ethan stopped, too tired to be surprised. "Of course you heard. One of the men arrested is on my board of directors. Well, was on my board. I'm having him removed." Her voice carried cold fury. "He laid hands on you. He could have seriously hurt you." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Where are you?" "In my car. Outside the police station." Ethan leaned his head against the steering wheel. "I need to sleep, but I have class in 2 hours. Then work tonight. Then—" "Come to my place," Victoria interrupted. "It's 10 minutes from where you are. You can sleep, actually sleep, without worrying about anything. I have a guest room. I'll be in my office working. You won't even know I'm there." Every reflex screamed to decline, but Ethan was too exhausted to fight himself and Victoria simultaneously. "Okay." She texted him the address. He drove through downtown to a building he'd passed 1,000 times without really seeing. Glass and steel and money made architectural. The doorman knew Victoria's name, directed Ethan to a private elevator that opened directly into her penthouse. The space was enormous and somehow still felt intimate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked comfortable rather than showy, bookshelves covering an entire wall, filled with actual books that showed signs of being read. Victoria met him at the elevator, wearing business casual and looking concerned. "Guest room's through there?" She pointed down a hallway. Bathroom's attached. There are clean towels, and I think I have spare clothes that might fit if you want a shower. Sleep as long as you need. Ethan wanted to say something about how this was too much, how he shouldn't be here, how accepting this level of care felt dangerous. Instead, he said, "Thank you." He made it to the guest room, saw a bed that looked like luxury-made fabric, and collapsed onto it fully clothed. Sleep hit him like a physical force. He woke to darkness and momentary panic before remembering where he was. His phone showed 6:47 p.m. He'd slept for 8 hours straight, missing class, missing the start of his shift, missing everything. He stumbled into the hallway, following voices to a living room where Victoria sat cross-legged on her couch, talking animatedly with Maya, his daughter. In Victoria's penthouse, having what looked like a tea party with actual tea and cookies arranged on a coffee table. "Daddy!" Maya jumped up, ran to him. "Victoria came and got me from school. She said you needed to sleep and asked if I wanted to have an adventure. And I said yes, because adventures are important, and we went to a bookstore, and she bought me 3 books. And then we came back here and we're having tea like sophisticated ladies." Ethan looked at Victoria over his daughter's head, questions piling up faster than he could articulate them. "I called your school," Victoria said calmly. "Told them you had a family emergency and I was your sister picking up Maya. I hope that's okay. I also called your work and told them you had an accident and wouldn't be in tonight. Sandra said she understood and to take tomorrow off too if you need it." Ethan couldn't quite process. "You just decided you needed to sleep. Maya needed picking up from school. I have the resources to solve both problems, so I did." Victoria stood, smoothed her skirt. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I was worried about you." Maya tugged on Ethan's hand. "Are you mad? Please don't be mad. Please. Victoria taught me about Emily Dickinson, and I learned that poetry doesn't have to rhyme." Ethan looked at his daughter's excited face, at Victoria's carefully neutral expression, at the evidence of care that surrounded him. He thought about his mother's words, about promises to try, about the difference between accepting help and drowning in pride. "I'm not mad," he said finally. "I'm just—" He paused, searching for honesty. "I'm not used to people taking care of me." "Get used to it." Victoria's smile was small but genuine. "Friends help friends. That's the deal." They had dinner together, pasta Victoria ordered from somewhere that delivered food that actually tasted homemade. Maya chattered about her day, her books, her sophisticated tea party. Victoria listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. Ethan watched them interact and felt something in his chest loosen, some guard he'd been holding finally easing. After dinner, after Maya fell asleep on Victoria's couch mid-sentence during a story about her friend at school, Ethan carried his daughter to the car while Victoria walked them down. "Thank you," he said when they reached his car. "For today. For all of it. I don't know how to—" "You don't have to thank me." Victoria stood in the parking garage, her arms crossed against the evening chill. "I wanted to help. I was glad I could." Ethan settled Maya into her car seat, then turned back to Victoria. The words came out before he could stop them. "My mother thinks you're in love with me." Victoria went very still. "Your mother is perceptive." "Are you?" His heart hammered. "In love with me?" For a long moment, Victoria didn't answer. Then quietly, "Yes." Hopelessly, inconveniently, against all my better judgment. "I've been in love with you since I saw you in that hospital waiting room, being kind to a nurse who'd made a mistake, reading your textbook like it held secrets to saving the world. I'm in love with how you love your daughter, how you fight for your mother, how you refuse to take the easy way even when the hard way is killing you. I'm in love with your integrity and your stubbornness and the way you make me want to be better than I am." Ethan's throat felt tight. "That's a lot." "I know. I'm sorry." Victoria looked away. "I wasn't going to tell you. I know you're not ready. I know your life is complicated and you don't have room for this. But you asked, and I won't lie to you." "What if—" Ethan stopped, started again. "What if I'm not ready, but I want to try?" Victoria's eyes snapped back to his face. "What? What if I admitted that I think about you constantly, that you make me feel less alone, That Maya talks about you with the same excitement she used to reserve only for her mother? Ethan stepped closer. What if I told you that terrifies me, but I'm tired of running from things that scare me? Then I'd say we figure it out together. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. Slowly, at whatever pace you need. Ethan kissed her. Not dramatically, not perfectly, just a simple press of lips that felt like jumping off a cliff and discovering you could fly. Victoria made a small sound of surprise, then kissed him back, her hands coming up to frame his face with a gentleness that made his chest ache. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I, Victoria laughed shakily. But I'm willing to learn if you are. Maya stirred in the car seat, mumbling something about cookies in her sleep. Ethan stepped back, reality reasserting itself in the form of a 6-year-old who needed to get home to bed. Dinner tomorrow? Victoria asked. Real dinner, like a date. Like a date, Ethan agreed, and drove home with his daughter sleeping and his heart doing things he'd thought it had forgotten how to do. The date happened on a Friday night that felt significant in ways Ethan couldn't quite articulate. He'd arranged for Judith to watch Maya, had actually taken time to iron a shirt, and found himself standing outside an Italian restaurant in a neighborhood he rarely visited, feeling like a teenager before prom. Victoria arrived exactly on time, wearing a blue dress that was elegant without being ostentatious, her hair loose around her shoulders in a way he had never seen before. Hi, she said, and the simple greeting carried enough nervous energy that Ethan relaxed slightly, realizing he wasn't the only one who felt unsteady. Hi. He opened the restaurant door and they stepped into warm lighting and the smell of garlic and bread. Dinner unfolded with a naturalness that surprised them both. They talked about everything and nothing, Maya's latest obsession with chapter books, Victoria's ongoing battle with her board of directors over ethical sourcing policies, the criminal law class Ethan was taking that made him question everything he thought he understood about justice. The conversation flowed without the careful politeness of their earlier interactions, replaced by something more honest, more willing to stumble. Can I ask you something personal? Victoria set down her wine glass, her expression serious. Depends how personal. Do you still love your wife? The question came out gently, without accusation. I need to know if I'm competing with a memory. Ethan took a breath, considered deflecting, chose honesty instead. I'll always love Sarah. She was my first love, Maya's mother, the person who taught me what partnership could look like. But loving her doesn't mean I'm stuck in the past. It means I know what I'm capable of feeling, what I want to feel again. He met Victoria's eyes. You're not competing with her memory. You're just dealing with someone who loved deeply once and is terrified of doing it again and losing it. That's fair. Victoria's relief was visible. I can work with terrified. It's indifference I couldn't handle. There's nothing indifferent about how I feel about you. Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. I'm falling for you, Victoria, fast and hard, and in ways that scare me because I have so much to lose if this goes wrong. I have Maya to think about, my mother, my entire life that's balanced on a knife's edge. I can't afford to make mistakes. What if we don't think of it as a mistake or not a mistake? Victoria laced her fingers through his. What if we just think of it as two people trying to build something together, and we deal with problems as they come, instead of catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong? You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it doesn't have to be impossible either. She squeezed his hand. I know you're worried about the money difference, about dependence, about all of it. But what if we set boundaries? What if we decide together what help looks like, what's appropriate, what crosses lines? They spent the next hour doing exactly that, mapping out rules that felt both absurd and necessary. Victoria wouldn't pay for anything without asking first. Ethan would communicate when he needed help instead of suffering in silence. They would split dates according to their means. She could afford expensive restaurants. He could afford diners, and both counted equally. Maya's needs came first, always. Honesty mattered more than comfort. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu they shared from one plate, Ethan felt like they'd laid groundwork for something that might actually work. I want to meet your mother properly, Victoria said as they left the restaurant, walking slowly toward where they'd parked on opposite sides of the street. Not just visiting when you're not there. I want her to know I'm serious about you. She already likes you more than she likes most of my choices. Ethan smiled. But yes, I'd like that too. They stopped at the intersection between their cars, neither quite ready for the evening to end. Victoria stepped closer, her hand finding his, and Ethan pulled her in for a kiss that felt different from the one in the parking garage. Less desperate, more certain, like they were writing the first page of something instead of testing whether pages were possible. I have to pick up Maya, he said when they finally separated, his forehead resting against hers. I know. Victoria smiled. Go, be with your daughter. Text me when you're home safe. You sound like a mom. I sound like someone who cares whether you make it home. She kissed him once more, quick and sweet. Which I am. Ethan drove to Judith's house feeling lighter than he had in years, picked up a sleepy Maya who asked approximately 15 questions about his date with Victoria, and fell asleep that night thinking maybe, possibly, he could have this. Maybe he deserved good things too. The following 2 weeks established a rhythm that felt sustainable. Victoria integrated into Ethan's life in small, manageable ways. Coffee dates during Maya's school hours, dinners at Ethan's apartment where Victoria learned that his kitchen was barely functional and his culinary skills were limited to pasta and grilled cheese. She met his mother officially, bringing flowers and sitting through an hour-long conversation where his mother asked increasingly pointed questions about Victoria's intentions. She's intense, Victoria said afterward, laughing as they walked to the parking lot. I like her. She's protective. She knows I have terrible judgment about some things. Do you have terrible judgment about me? Victoria stopped, genuine concern in her expression. I don't know yet. Ethan kissed her forehead. But I'm willing to find out. Maya adored Victoria with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of children who hadn't learned to guard their hearts. She showed Victoria her drawings, her books, her elaborate stories about the stuffed animals that lived on her bed. Victoria listened with patience that seemed genuine, asked questions that showed she was actually paying attention, and never talked down to her the way some adults did. Is Victoria going to be my new mom? Maya asked one night during their bedtime routine, her voice carefully casual in the way that meant the question was anything but. Ethan sat on the edge of her bed, brushing hair from her face. Would you want her to be? I don't want to forget Mommy. Maya's eyes filled with tears. But I like Victoria. Does that mean I'm being bad to Mommy? Oh, baby, no. Ethan pulled his daughter close, his own throat tight. Loving Victoria doesn't mean forgetting Mommy. Your heart is big enough to love lots of people. Mommy would want you to be happy, to let people love you and to love them back. That's not being bad. That's being open to joy. Do you love Victoria? Maya pulled back, studying his face with her unnervingly perceptive 6-year-old gaze. I'm starting to, yes. Good. Maya settled back into her pillow, clutching her elephant. She makes you smile real smiles, not the pretend ones you do when you're tired. After Maya fell asleep, Ethan sat in his living room and confronted the reality he'd been avoiding. He was genuinely in love with Victoria Hale, and that love came with complications that extended far beyond the practical concerns he'd initially worried about. The first real test came on a Tuesday afternoon when Ethan's mother's doctor called with news about her latest scans. The experimental treatment had stopped working. The cancer was progressing again, faster this time, and the options were limited to palliative care or another round of experimental treatments that cost even more than the first and had a 5% success rate. Ethan sat in his car outside the community college, staring at his phone, doing math that had never worked before and wouldn't work now. His savings were depleted from car payments to Victoria and regular bills. His credit was shot. The hospital had payment plans, but even those assumed a baseline income he didn't have. Victoria called while he was still sitting there, her voice warm. Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight? I was thinking we could try that Thai place Maya mentioned. I can't. Ethan's voice came out flat. Something came up with my mom. I need to deal with it. What happened? Is she okay? Concern sharpened Victoria's tone. She's... Ethan stopped, the weight of it crashing down. The treatment stopped working. The doctor wants to try something new, but it's expensive, and I don't... His voice broke. I don't know what to do. Where are you? School parking lot. Stay there. I'm coming. Victoria hung up before Ethan could protest. She arrived 20 minutes later, parking next to him and climbing into his passenger seat without asking permission. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there while Ethan tried to compose himself and failed completely. How much? She finally asked. No. Ethan shook his head. No, we're not doing this. We had rules. How much, Ethan? 60,000 for the full treatment protocol. Maybe more depending on how she responds. He laughed bitterly. Might as well be 6 million for all the difference it makes. Let me pay for it. Victoria said it simply, the way someone might offer to pick up a coffee tab. Absolutely not. Why not? Because that's not help, Victoria. That's you solving my life with your checkbook, and that changes everything between us. It makes me dependent on you in ways I can't come back from. Ethan turned to face her. I need to know you're with me because you want to be, not because I owe you. You think I'd hold this over you? Victoria's voice rose with hurt. You think I'm that kind of person? I think money changes everything, whether you want it to or not. I think I can't be your equal if you're paying for my mother's life. I think... Ethan stopped, forced himself to breathe. I think I love you too much to let you become my savior. I need to be a partner, not a project. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her hands twisting in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was careful. What if it's not me paying? What if it's a foundation grant? I have a charitable foundation that provides medical assistance to families in need. It's legitimate, managed by a board, has specific criteria. You'd qualify. A foundation you control. A foundation that exists specifically to help people like you. Victoria met his eyes. This is what the money is for, Ethan. Not to control you or make you dependent. To help when help is needed. Let it help. Ethan wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain the boundaries they'd established, wanted to prove he could handle this himself. But his mother was dying, and pride felt like a luxury he couldn't afford when her life was the cost. I'll apply through proper channels, he said finally. If the board approves it based on merit, not because you tell them to, then I'll accept it. But it goes through the system like everyone else. Deal. Victoria's relief was palpable. I'll get you the application information. You fill it out, submit it, and the board reviews it without my input. I'll recuse myself from the vote. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for everything they carried. Victoria reached across the center console, took his hand. I love you. I know we haven't said it officially, but I do. I love you. And loving someone means helping when they're drowning, even if they're too proud to ask for the life preserver. I love you too. Ethan said it for the first time, and it felt like jumping off another cliff. Which is why I need this to be right. I need us to be equals, even when our bank accounts say we're not. We're equals where it matters. Victoria squeezed his hand. In how we treat each other, in respect, in honesty. The rest is just logistics. The foundation application took Ethan 3 days to complete, requiring documentation of medical necessity, financial hardship, and future prognosis. He filled it out honestly, including details about his income, his debts, and his mother's condition. He submitted it through the foundation's online portal and tried not to think about the fact that Victoria probably saw it within hours. The approval came back in a week, a formal letter stating that the Hale Foundation Board had voted to provide full coverage for his mother's treatment, renewable based on medical necessity. Victoria's name appeared nowhere in the approval documentation. Ethan called the foundation office to confirm the legitimacy, spoke to a program director who walked him through the terms without once mentioning Victoria, and finally allowed himself to believe it might actually be real. His mother started the new treatment protocol the following Monday. Ethan sat with her during the first infusion, watching poison drip into her veins with the hope it would save her life, and felt Victoria's influence even in her absence. You love her. His mother said it without preamble, her voice weak but certain. Yes. And she loves you. Yes. Ethan watched the IV bag, counting drips. So what's the problem? There's no problem. We're figuring it out. He looked at his mother. Why do you assume there's a problem? Because you have your worried face on. The same face you had when Sarah was pregnant and you were terrified you'd be a terrible father. She smiled slightly. You weren't terrible then, and you're not terrible now. But you need to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. What if the shoe always drops? What if good things don't last? Ethan's voice carried the exhaustion of 3 years of loss. Then you love them while they're here. His mother reached for his hand. You don't refuse joy because you're afraid of grief. You take the joy and hold it close and let it make you stronger for when grief comes. That's all any of us can do. Ethan stayed through the full infusion, then drove to Victoria's office downtown, a sleek building where everyone seemed to know who he was before he introduced himself. Her assistant directed him to the top floor, where Victoria sat behind a massive desk covered in documents, looking every bit the billionaire executive he sometimes forgot she was. Hi. She looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing her face. What are you doing here? Thanking you. Ethan closed the door behind him. For the foundation, for the treatment, for loving me enough to let me pretend I'm maintaining independence. You are maintaining independence. The foundation is Victoria. Ethan walked around her desk, pulled her to her feet. I know you pushed it through. I know the board probably wouldn't have approved it without your influence. And I'm choosing to accept that because my mother's life matters more than my pride. Victoria's expression shifted, defenses dropping. I didn't want you to know. I know. Because you were trying to protect my feelings while saving my mother's life, which is exactly why I love you. He kissed her, pouring 3 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into the connection. Thank you for all of it. They spent the next hour in her office, Victoria explaining the actual foundation work, the families they helped, the medical research they funded, the genuine good the money accomplished. Ethan listened and realized that her wealth wasn't just an obstacle between them. It was also a tool for change, wielded by someone who actually cared about its impact. Come to a gala with me, Victoria said as they were leaving her office. Next month. Big fundraiser for the foundation. I know it's not your scene, but I'd like you there. As your date? Ethan clarified. As my partner. I want people to know I'm serious about you, that you're not a secret or a phase, that you matter. She stopped in the hallway, executive presence fading into vulnerability. Unless that's too much too fast. It terrifies me, Ethan admitted. But yes, I'll go. The gala preparation became its own adventure. Victoria insisted on buying Ethan a suit, which led to their first real argument, him insisting he could rent one, her pointing out that he'd need formal wear for future events, back and forth, until they compromised on her paying for it as an early birthday present. Maya thought the whole thing was hilarious, offering fashion advice that mostly involved suggesting Ethan wear a cape. Fancy people don't wear capes, baby, Ethan explained while trying on the third suit option. They should. Capes are cool. Maya flopped onto Victoria's guest bed, where they'd been conducting the fashion show. Victoria, don't you think Daddy would look cool in a cape? Extremely cool, Victoria agreed seriously. But the gala has a strict no-cape policy. Very unfortunate. The night of the event arrived with the weight of significance. Ethan put on the charcoal suit that fit better than anything he'd ever worn, helped Maya video call with his mother so she could see him dressed up, and drove to Victoria's penthouse to pick her up like an actual date instead of meeting there. She answered the door in a floor-length emerald gown that made Ethan forget how to form sentences for a solid 10 seconds. Her hair was swept up, her makeup subtle but perfect, and she looked like she belonged on magazine covers instead of with a bartender taking night classes. You clean up nice, she said, smiling. You look like… Ethan stopped, started again. I don't have words. You're stunning. We match. She touched his tie, which was the same shade of emerald. I may have coordinated. The gala was exactly as overwhelming as Ethan had feared. Held in a museum that had been closed for the event, filled with people whose net worth exceeded small nations, featuring food Ethan couldn't pronounce, and wine that probably cost more per glass than he made in a day. Victoria stayed close, introducing him to board members and donors and business partners with a possessive pride that made his discomfort almost worth it. This is Ethan Cole, she told a tech CEO whose name Ethan recognized from news headlines. He's studying criminal justice and working toward becoming a detective. We're together. The CEO asked intelligent questions about Ethan's studies, seeming genuinely interested rather than patronizing, and Ethan started to relax incrementally. Maybe this world wasn't entirely alien. Maybe he could learn its language. The trouble started during dinner, when a woman Ethan didn't recognize approached their table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was older, expensively maintained, and radiated the kind of casual cruelty that came from never being told no. "Victoria, darling, I didn't know you were bringing a date." The woman's gaze raked over Ethan with visible assessment. "And who is this handsome stranger?" "Catherine, this is Ethan Cole. Ethan, this is Catherine Whitmore. She's on the hospital board." Victoria's voice carried a warning Ethan couldn't quite interpret. "Charming." Catherine extended a hand, and Ethan shook it briefly. "And what do you do, Ethan?" "I'm a bartender and a student." He'd learned that honesty disarmed people faster than pretense. "How interesting." Catherine's tone suggested it was anything but. "And how did you two meet?" "I served her a drink. She asked me out. I said no 3 times before saying yes." Ethan smiled blandly. "Persistence runs in wealthy families, apparently." Victoria choked on her wine. Catherine's expression froze somewhere between shock and indignation. "Well," Catherine said after a pause, "how refreshingly direct. I'm sure you'll find our world quite different from what you're accustomed to." "I'm sure I will." Ethan's smile never wavered. "But I'm adaptable." Catherine drifted away after a few more pointed comments, and Victoria turned to Ethan with barely suppressed laughter. "Did you just tell Catherine Whitmore, one of the most powerful socialites in the city, that you rejected me 3 times?" "I told her the truth." "Was I not supposed to?" "No, that was perfect. I've never seen her actually speechless before." Victoria kissed his cheek. "You're going to be dangerous at these things once you get comfortable." But comfort felt distant when the night progressed, and Ethan became increasingly aware of the attention focused on them. Curious stares, whispered conversations, the way people assessed him like a curiosity rather than a person. He excused himself to the bathroom after the main course, needing a moment away from the scrutiny. He was washing his hands when 2 men entered mid-conversation, not noticing him immediately. "Did you see Victoria's new boy toy? Apparently he's a bartender." The voice dripped condescension. "Poor bastard has no idea what he's gotten into. She'll get bored in a month and move on to the next project." The second man laughed. "Remember the artist phase, the activist phase? This is just her latest attempt to feel relevant." Ethan dried his hands slowly, watching them in the mirror. They still hadn't noticed him. "Think he's after her money?" the first man asked. "Obviously. What else would someone like that want with her?" "Excuse me?" Ethan turned around, and both men startled. "I'm the bartender, and you're wrong about several things." The first man had the grace to look embarrassed. The second doubled down. "No offense intended." None taken, because your opinion of me is irrelevant." Ethan kept his voice level. "But for the record, Victoria asked me out. I rejected her multiple times because I didn't want her money or her connections. I still don't. I want her because she's brilliant and kind and challenges me to be better than I am. If that's incomprehensible to you, that says more about your relationships than mine." He left before they could respond, walked back into the ballroom with his heart pounding, and found Victoria exactly where he'd left her. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. Victoria looked surprised, but took it, letting him lead her to the floor where other couples swayed to orchestra music. Ethan pulled her closer than was probably appropriate for this kind of event, and felt some of the evening's tension ease. "What happened?" Victoria asked quietly. "Nothing important, just a reminder that I'm always going to be an outsider in your world." He met her eyes. "Is that going to be a problem?" "You're not an outsider. You're exactly where you belong." Victoria's hand tightened on his shoulder. "Anyone who makes you feel otherwise doesn't matter." "Even if it's everyone?" Ethan asked, only half joking. "Especially if it's everyone." She smiled. "I didn't fall in love with you because you fit into this world. I fell in love with you because you don't, because you reminded me that there are more important things than quarterly earnings and social status and all the other bullshit I was raised to value." They danced through 2 more songs, and Ethan felt the stares continue but found he cared less. This woman in his arms loved him, genuinely and completely. Maya loved him. His mother was fighting for her life with treatment his pride hadn't prevented. He had a future he was building deliberately instead of just surviving. The rest was noise. The gala ended around midnight, and they escaped to Victoria's car with relief that felt mutual. She drove them back to her penthouse, and Ethan followed her inside without discussing it, both of them kicking off formal shoes and collapsing onto her couch with exhausted laughter. "I hate those events," Victoria admitted, her head on his shoulder. "I know they're necessary, that they raise money for important causes, but I hate the performance of it all." "Then why do them?" "Because the foundation helps people. Because my name gets people to open their checkbooks, and that money saves lives, like your mother's." She looked up at him. "It's worth the discomfort." Ethan kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her mouth, slow and thorough. "Stay with me tonight," Victoria whispered against his lips. "Not for anything except being together. I just want you here. I need to pick up Maya in the morning. I'll set an alarm. We'll get breakfast. Pick her up together." Victoria's fingers traced patterns on his chest. "Please, I don't want to be alone tonight." "Okay?" Ethan pulled her closer. "I'll stay." They fell asleep on the couch, still in their formal wear, wrapped around each other like they were afraid to let go. Ethan woke at dawn to find Victoria watching him, her expression soft in the early light. "What?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "Nothing. Everything." She smiled. "I'm just happy you're here." "Me too." And he meant it, complications and all. They picked up Maya together that morning, stopping first at a pancake house where his daughter ordered chocolate chip pancakes with enough whipped cream to constitute a health hazard. Victoria sat across from them in yesterday's gown covered by Ethan's suit jacket, her hair still pinned up, looking completely out of place and entirely comfortable. "Did you sleep at Victoria's house?" Maya asked with the bluntness of 6-year-old interrogation. "I did," Ethan answered honestly, prepared for follow-up questions. "Cool. Can I sleep there sometime? Her place has really tall windows, and I want to see what the city looks like from up high at nighttime." Maya took a massive bite of pancakes, syrup dripping down her chin. Victoria laughed, wiping Maya's face with a napkin. "Anytime you want, we can have a sleepover, watch movies, maybe build a blanket fort." "Really?" Maya's eyes went wide. "Daddy, can we? Please." Ethan looked at Victoria, saw genuine enthusiasm rather than polite accommodation, and felt something settle deeper in his chest. If Victoria's serious, then yes. "I'm completely serious. I make excellent blanket forts." Victoria's expression turned mock solemn. "It's one of my few actual skills. That and hostile corporate takeovers, but the blanket forts are more fun." The sleepover happened 2 weeks later, a Friday night when Ethan's mother was having a good week, and he'd finished midterm exams. Maya packed her overnight bag with the gravity of someone preparing for a serious expedition, including her stuffed elephant, 3 books, and a flashlight for reasons she insisted were important but wouldn't explain. Victoria's penthouse transformed for the occasion. She'd ordered pizza, set up a movie queue of animated films, and had indeed constructed an elaborate blanket fort in her living room that used couch cushions, dining chairs, and what looked like expensive throw blankets that definitely weren't meant for child's play. "This is the best fort ever," Maya declared, crawling inside with her elephant. "Even better than the one Daddy made when the power went out." "To be fair, I had more materials to work with," Victoria said, shooting Ethan a smile. "Your dad had to work with what was available during a blackout. That's much more impressive." They watched movies until Maya fell asleep mid-scene, curled up inside the fort with her elephant clutched tight. Ethan carried her to the guest room while Victoria cleaned up pizza boxes and returned cushions to their proper places. "You're good with her," Ethan said when he returned, finding Victoria dismantling the fort with what looked like reluctance. "It's not an act, is it? You genuinely like having her here." "I love having her here." Victoria folded a blanket carefully. "She's funny and smart and sees the world in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Plus, she thinks I'm cool, which is a nice change from board meetings where everyone thinks I'm terrifying. You can be both." Ethan helped with the cleanup, their movements synchronized from weeks of growing familiarity. "Cool and terrifying. It's part of your charm." They settled onto the couch once the living room was restored, Victoria's head on Ethan's shoulder, the city lights spreading below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a while they just sat in comfortable silence, and Ethan marveled at how normal this felt, how quickly Victoria had become integral to his life rather than an addition to it. "I want to tell you something," Victoria said eventually, her voice quiet, "about why I'm so comfortable with Maya, why I know about blanket forts and bedtime routines." Ethan waited, sensing this was important. "I had a sister." Victoria's fingers traced patterns on his knee. "Younger by 4 years. Her name was Charlotte, and she was everything I wasn't. Warm, open, genuinely kind without having to try. Our parents were always working, building the empire, so I basically raised her, read to her, helped with homework, built forts on rainy days. She was my favorite person in the world." The past tense registered with painful clarity. "What happened?" "Leukemia. She was diagnosed at 12, fought for 3 years, died 2 weeks after her 15th birthday." Victoria's voice stayed steady, but Ethan felt tension radiating through her body. "I was 19, home from college for summer break. I was with her at the end. She made me promise I wouldn't let her death make me bitter, that I'd keep being kind even when kindness hurt." "I'm so sorry." The words felt inadequate. "It's part of why I started the medical foundation. Why I can't stand seeing families bankrupted by healthcare costs, watching people suffer because they can't afford treatment. It's why your mother's situation mattered so much to me beyond just wanting to help you." Victoria looked up at him. "Charlotte would have loved Maya. They would have been trouble together." Ethan pulled her closer, understanding now the careful way she handled his daughter, the genuine joy in her interactions. "Thank you for telling me. I wanted you to know I understand what you're protecting, that Maya isn't just important because she's your daughter. She's important because children are miracles, and we should fight like hell to give them good lives." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I see Charlotte in her sometimes, that unfiltered honesty, that capacity for joy. It hurts, and it's wonderful at the same time." They stayed wrapped together until exhaustion pulled them towards sleep, moving to Victoria's bedroom without discussion. Ethan woke once during the night to check on Maya, found her sleeping peacefully, and returned to find Victoria awake and waiting. "She okay?" Victoria asked. "Perfect. Snoring slightly and definitely drooling on your expensive pillows." "Good. That's what they're for." Victoria smiled in the darkness. "Come back to bed." The next morning brought pancakes again, apparently a weekend tradition Victoria was instituting, and Maya's enthusiastic recap of the sleepover to anyone who would listen. Ethan's mother got the full story during their hospital visit that afternoon, delivered with the dramatic flair of someone describing a grand adventure. "And the fort had 4 rooms, Grandma, 4 whole rooms, and we watched 2 movies and ate pizza, and Victoria said, 'Next time we can make cookies from scratch,' which I've never done because Daddy only knows how to make the kind that comes in a tube." Maya barely paused for breath. "Can we live with Victoria? Her house is really big and she has a whole library of books, and I could have my own room with those tall windows." Ethan's mother caught his eye over Maya's head, her expression amused. "That's a big question, sweetheart. That's something your daddy and Victoria would have to talk about." "But would you be sad if we moved?" Maya's face turned serious. "Because you're here and I want to see you every day." "Oh, baby, I won't be here forever." His mother's honesty was gentle but clear. "I'm getting better right now, but someday I won't be here anymore. And when that happens, I want to know you and your daddy are happy and taken care of. If that's with Victoria, then that makes me happy." Maya processed this with the straightforward acceptance of children who understood death better than adults gave them credit for. "Okay. But until then, can Victoria come visit you with us?" "I'd like that very much." Victoria did start joining their hospital visits, initially once a week and then more frequently as his mother's condition stabilized into what the doctors cautiously called remission. She brought books and read aloud when his mother was too tired to talk, discussed literature and philosophy, and the kind of deep conversations his mother had missed during months of focusing purely on survival. Ethan watched them bond over poetry and old films, and felt his 2 worlds merging in ways that stopped feeling jarring and started feeling right. His mother pulled him aside one afternoon while Victoria was entertaining Maya in the hospital cafeteria. "That woman loves you something fierce." "I know." Ethan adjusted her pillows, a task he'd performed countless times. "I love her too." "So what's holding you back?" His mother's gaze was sharp. "You're still keeping part of yourself separate. I can see it." "I'm scared." The admission came easier than expected. "I'm scared of needing her too much, of Maya getting too attached and then losing her like she lost Sarah. I'm scared of this being temporary, of waking up one day and realizing the novelty wore off, and she's done with the complications my life brings." "Fear is reasonable. Fear is smart." His mother took his hand. "But fear can't make your decisions for you. That girl in the cafeteria making your daughter laugh? She's not going anywhere. She's in this for real. The question is whether you're going to let yourself be in it too, all the way, or whether you're going to keep one foot out the door just in case." "What if I choose wrong?" "Then you choose wrong, and you survive it like you've survived everything else." She squeezed his hand. "But baby, what if you choose right? What if you let yourself have this and it's everything you hoped for? Doesn't that possibility deserve a chance?" Ethan sat with that question through the rest of the visit, through the drive home, through dinner and Maya's bath time, and the quiet evening hours after she went to sleep. He sat with it while Victoria texted him goodnight, while he stared at his ceiling thinking about futures that felt both possible and terrifying. The decision crystallized 2 days later when he came home from class to find his apartment door slightly ajar. Every instinct from 3 years of criminal justice training screamed warning. He pulled out his phone, ready to call the police, when he heard voices inside. Maya's laugh, and a deeper voice he didn't recognize. Ethan pushed the door open carefully, preparing for confrontation, and stopped dead. Victoria sat on his living room floor with Maya, surrounded by moving boxes and packing materials. A man in a work uniform was carrying Ethan's bookshelf toward the door. His furniture, his life, was being systematically packed up by strangers while his daughter giggled and his girlfriend directed traffic. "What the hell is going on?" Ethan's voice came out harder than intended. Victoria looked up, surprise and something like guilt crossing her face. "You're home early. What are you doing?" He moved into the apartment, taking in the chaos. "Why are there movers in my apartment?" "Daddy, we're moving." Maya bounced over to him. "Victoria said we're going to live with her in the tall building, and I get my own room, and there's a park nearby, and—" "Maya, go to your room, please." Ethan kept his eyes on Victoria. "Now." His daughter's excitement dimmed, recognizing his serious tone. She retreated to her bedroom without argument. The movers looked uncomfortable. Victoria stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "Can we talk about this?" "You're packing up my apartment without asking me. What exactly is there to talk about?" Ethan's hands shook with anger and something deeper, something that felt like betrayal. "Your lease is up at the end of the month. I checked with your landlord, who confirmed you hadn't renewed yet. This building is being sold for redevelopment, which means your rent was going to increase 40% anyway, which you can't afford." Victoria spoke quickly, defensive. "Moving in together makes practical sense. My place is bigger, closer to Maya's school, closer to the hospital. You wouldn't have to pay rent, which would free up money for—" "Stop." Ethan cut her off. "Just stop talking." He turned to the movers. "Thank you for your time, but this was a mistake. Please unpack everything and put it back where you found it." The movers looked at Victoria, clearly uncertain who was actually in charge. She nodded slowly, and they began reversing their work without comment. Ethan walked to his bedroom, heard Victoria follow, and turned on her once they had privacy. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I could help, that I could make your life easier." Victoria's defenses were up now. "You're killing yourself trying to maintain this place while paying for everything else. Moving in together solves multiple problems. By making decisions about my life without consulting me? By going behind my back and packing up my home like I'm a child who can't manage his own affairs?" Ethan's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You seeing a problem and throwing money at it without considering how it makes me feel." "How does it make you feel?" Victoria shot back. "Angry that someone wants to take care of you? Offended that I don't want you struggling when I have resources to help?" "Erased." The word came out louder than Ethan intended. "It makes me feel erased, like my choices don't matter because you have the money to override them. Like I'm not an equal partner in this relationship, just someone you're managing. Victoria flinched as though he'd struck her. That's not fair, isn't it? You decided we should live together. You contacted my landlord without telling me. You hired movers and started packing my life away like it's yours to organize. Ethan sat on his bed, suddenly exhausted. I love you, Victoria, but I can't be with someone who thinks loving me means controlling me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Victoria's eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall, her posture rigid with hurt and anger. I wasn't trying to control you, she said finally, her voice small. I was trying to show you that you don't have to do everything alone anymore. That I'm here. That I want to build a life with you. That my home could be our home. Then you should have asked me. You should have had a conversation instead of making assumptions. Ethan looked up at her. I've spent 3 years fighting to maintain control over my life, to prove I can provide for my daughter, to not be dependent on anyone. You can't just sweep in and take that away because you think you know better. You're right. Victoria sat beside him, careful not to touch. I'm sorry. I overstepped. I thought I was helping, but I was really just trying to fix things my way because that's what I've always done. Fix problems with money and resources and not consider how it affects the people I claim to love. I want to live with you, Ethan said quietly. Eventually, when we both decide it's right, together. Not because my lease is up or because it's financially practical, but because we're ready to take that step as equals. Okay. Victoria wiped her eyes. Okay. We'll wait until we're both ready, and I promise, no more surprise decisions. We talk about everything. Everything, Ethan confirmed. They sat in silence while the movers finished unpacking in the other room, returning his life to its proper places. Maya emerged once they were done, confused and disappointed, asking why they weren't moving anymore. Because Daddy and I need to talk more about it first, Victoria explained, kneeling to Maya's level. I made a mistake by not asking Daddy before I started packing. That wasn't fair to him. But I wanted to live in the tall building. Maya's lower lip trembled. I know, sweetheart, and maybe we will someday. But it has to be when we're all ready, not just me deciding for everyone. Victoria looked up at Ethan. Right, Daddy? Right. Ethan pulled Maya into a hug. Victoria and I need to figure some things out, but we're not fighting, and everything's okay. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and have to fix them. After Victoria left, after Maya went to bed asking repeated questions about whether Victoria was still his girlfriend, Ethan sat in his living room and examined the fight from every angle. Part of him wondered if he'd overreacted, if pride had made him reject help that was genuinely well-intentioned. But a larger part knew he'd been right to draw the boundary, to insist on agency in his own life. His phone buzzed around 11. Victoria's name appeared on screen. I'm still sorry, she said when he answered. I keep thinking about what I did and feeling sick about it. You trusted me, and I violated that trust because I thought I knew what was best. I appreciate the apology. Ethan leaned back against the couch. But we need to talk about this pattern. The foundation for my mom, the car loan, now this. You see problems and you solve them, and sometimes I need you to just let me struggle through finding my own solutions. Even when your solutions are harder and take longer and cause you more pain, Victoria's voice carried genuine confusion. That doesn't make sense to me. Why choose the hard way when easier options exist? Because the hard way is mine. Because struggling through problems and solving them myself is how I know I'm capable. Because accepting help for everything would eventually make me forget how to help myself. Ethan paused, searching for words to explain what felt fundamental. I need to know that if you left tomorrow, I could still survive. Not just financially, but emotionally. I need to know I'm whole on my own, so being with you is a choice instead of a necessity. I'm not going anywhere. Victoria's certainty was absolute. I love you. I'm committed to this. To you and Maya, and figuring out how to build a life together. I know you believe that right now, but people change their minds, situations change. I've already lost one person I loved. I need to know I can survive losing another if that's what happens. That's so sad. Victoria's voice broke slightly, living like you're already preparing for loss. It's realistic, and it's how I keep going. Ethan closed his eyes. I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm asking you to respect it. I do. I will. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Can I see you tomorrow? Can we try this again? But with actual communication this time? Yes. Come for dinner. I'll cook, which means pasta, but Maya likes my pasta, so you'll have to pretend it's good. I love your pasta. Victoria's smile came through the phone. I love you. I love you too. Even when you're impossible. Especially when I'm impossible, she corrected, and Ethan found himself smiling despite everything. The next month brought deliberate, conscious effort from both of them to communicate better. Victoria learned to ask before helping, to present options rather than solutions, to respect Ethan's need for agency even when it frustrated her practical nature. Ethan learned to accept help when offered, to recognize the difference between assistance and control, to let Victoria contribute to their life without seeing it as weakness. They found rhythm in small things. Sunday dinners at Ethan's apartment where Victoria brought groceries and he cooked, Wednesday coffee dates during Maya's school hours, overnight stays that happened organically rather than on schedule, both of them keeping clothes at the other's place without formal discussion of what that meant. His mother's health continued improving, the experimental treatment working better than anyone had predicted. She started talking about future plans, seeing Maya start first grade, maybe taking a trip once she was strong enough, writing the memoir she'd always planned. Ethan let himself believe in those futures without waiting for catastrophe. Maya turned 7 in December, with a party Victoria insisted on hosting at her penthouse. 20 kids from school descended on the space, transforming elegance into chaos, and Victoria navigated it all with genuine enjoyment. She'd hired entertainers, arranged activities, managed parents with the same competence she brought to board meetings, and at the end of it all collapsed on her couch next to Ethan, with Maya asleep between them. That was exhausting, Victoria said, but she was smiling. You loved every minute. Ethan brushed frosting from her hair. Admit it. I loved seeing Maya happy. The 20 screaming 7-year-olds were just a bonus. She looked at him over their daughter's sleeping form. Our daughter. I keep thinking of her that way. Is that okay? The question carried weight. Ethan considered it seriously, thought about Sarah in memory, and the difference between replacing and adding to. Yes, that's okay. Sarah would want Maya to have people who love her. You love her. That makes you family. I want to make this official. Victoria spoke carefully, like she was testing words. Not rushing, not pushing, just putting it out there. I want us to be a family for real. Marriage, adoption if you want, whatever form that takes. But official, permanent. That's a proposal? Ethan's heart kicked against his ribs. That's a statement of intent. The proposal can come later, when we're both ready, when it feels right. Victoria reached across Maya to take his hand. But I wanted you to know that's where I see this going. That I'm not just dating you or playing house. I'm building a future with you. Ethan squeezed her hand, emotion tight in his throat. I want that too, eventually, when we're ready. When we're ready, Victoria echoed. They stayed like that until Maya woke and demanded to know if there was any cake left. And Ethan thought about futures and families and the difference between fear and caution. He wasn't ready yet to take that final step, to trust completely that good things could last. But he was closer than he'd ever been, and that felt like its own kind of progress. The breaking point came in March, 6 months after Maya's birthday party, on a Thursday that started ordinary and ended with everything changing. Ethan was in his final semester of the criminal justice program, 3 months from graduation, when his mother collapsed during one of his visits. The cancer had returned with aggressive speed, metastasized beyond what treatment could address, and the doctors delivered news with the practiced gentleness of people who'd destroyed hope countless times before. Weeks, they said. Maybe a month if they were lucky. Ethan sat in the hospital hallway at 2 in the morning, his mother sleeping under morphine, and called Victoria because she was the only person he wanted. She arrived in 20 minutes wearing pajamas under her coat, her hair unbrushed, and sat beside him without speaking. They stayed like that for an hour, her hand in his, until a nurse suggested he go home and get some sleep. Come stay with me, Victoria said in the parking lot. Don't be alone tonight. I need to get Maya from Judith's. I'll come with you. We'll get her together, bring her to my place. You both can stay as long as you need. Victoria's voice was steady, offering structure when his world was fracturing. They collected a sleepy Maya, who asked no questions when they drove to Victoria's penthouse instead of home. Victoria settled her in the guest room while Ethan stood at the windows, watching the city lights blur through unshed tears. "She's asking for you," Victoria said quietly, returning to the living room. "Maya, she knows something's wrong." Ethan found his daughter sitting up in bed, her elephant clutched tight, her expression older than 7 had any right to be. "Is Grandma dying?" He'd promised himself he'd never lie to her about important things. "Yes, baby, she is." Maya's face crumpled. "When?" "Soon. The doctors think maybe a few weeks." Ethan sat on the bed, pulled her close. "I'm so sorry." "I don't want her to go." Maya sobbed against his chest, and Ethan held her while his own tears finally fell. "It's not fair. First Mommy and now Grandma. Why does everyone leave?" "I don't know." Ethan's voice cracked. "I don't know why the world works this way, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that." Victoria appeared in the doorway with tissues and sat on Maya's other side, creating a triangle of grief and comfort. She didn't offer platitudes or false hope, just presence, and Ethan loved her more in that moment than he'd known was possible. They spent the night in a tangle of limbs in the guest bed, Maya between them, and when morning came, they moved through the day like they'd been doing this forever. Victoria made breakfast while Ethan called his school and work to arrange leave. She drove Maya to school and explained the situation to her teacher while Ethan went to the hospital. She brought him lunch he couldn't eat and sat with his mother while he tried to study for finals he no longer cared about. "You found a good one," his mother said during a lucid moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let her go." "I won't." Ethan held her hand, memorizing the feel of her fingers. "I promise." "Marry her. Make it official. Give Maya the family she deserves." His mother's eyes were fierce despite the morphine. "Promise me, Ethan. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy." "I promise." The words felt like a vow. His mother smiled, satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. She didn't wake again. She died 3 days later, at dawn, with Ethan holding one hand and Victoria holding the other. It was peaceful, the doctors said, as if peace made loss easier to bear. Ethan sat with her body until the nurses gently suggested he should go, should take care of himself, should let them do their jobs. Victoria drove him home, to her penthouse, not his apartment, though neither of them discussed the distinction. Maya was already there, Judith having brought her over after school. His daughter took one look at his face and knew. "She's gone?" Maya asked, and when Ethan nodded, she walked into his arms and they cried together until there were no tears left. The funeral happened on a Tuesday. Victoria handled most of the arrangements because Ethan couldn't focus long enough to make decisions about flowers or music or any of the details that supposedly mattered. His mother's church friends came, co-workers from her years as a teacher, neighbors, people whose lives she'd touched in small ways that added up to significance. Ethan delivered a eulogy he barely remembered writing, talking about strength and sacrifice and a woman who'd raised him alone after his father left, who taught him that love meant showing up even when showing up was hard. He talked about how she'd fought cancer with the same stubborn determination she'd brought to everything, how she'd lived to see her granddaughter start school and her son fall in love again. Victoria sat in the front row with Maya, both of them crying, and Ethan realized they were his family now, the only family he had left. The reception at Victoria's penthouse was subdued but well attended. People shared stories about his mother, offered condolences that blurred together into white noise, and eventually dispersed back to their lives. By evening, only Victoria and Maya remained, and Ethan collapsed onto the couch feeling hollowed out and ancient. "Daddy?" Maya climbed into his lap, her small weight grounding. "Can we stay here tonight? I don't want to go home." "We can stay as long as Victoria says it's okay." "It's always okay." Victoria sat beside them. "Stay tonight, stay all week. Stay forever if you want." Ethan looked around the penthouse that had become more familiar than his own apartment over the past months. His clothes were already in Victoria's closet. His textbooks occupied shelf space in her library. Maya's drawings covered the refrigerator. They'd been living here in everything but name since his mother got sick. What if we did? The words surprised him as much as they did Victoria. Stay forever. Move in officially. Stop pretending we're not already living together. Victoria's expression shifted through shock to hope to careful neutrality. Is that what you want? Or is grief talking? Both maybe, but mostly the first one. Ethan set Maya down gently, turned to face Victoria fully. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of holding back because I'm scared of losing people. My mother died, and it's terrible, but you know what? You were there. You didn't run when things got hard. You held my hand while she died, and you helped me plan her funeral, and you've taken care of Maya and me like we're already yours. That's not temporary. That's not someone who's going to leave. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria said fiercely. I keep telling you that. I know. And I'm finally ready to believe it. Ethan took her hands. Move us in. Officially. Let's be a family for real. Maya, who'd been listening with the focused attention of children during important moments, threw herself at both of them. Does this mean Victoria's my mom now? That's up to Victoria, Ethan said carefully. Victoria pulled Maya into her lap, tears streaming down her face. I would be honored to be your mom, if that's what you want. I want it. Maya's certainty was absolute. I want us all to be together forever. They moved Ethan's remaining possessions the following weekend, officially closing the apartment he'd lived in for 3 years. It should have felt like defeat, like admitting he couldn't make it on his own, but instead it felt like coming home. Victoria cleared space in closets and cabinets, making room not just for his things but for his presence. They set up Maya's new room together, letting her choose colors and furniture, creating a space that was hers completely. The first month was adjustment, learning to share space permanently instead of temporarily, navigating domestic logistics, establishing routines that worked for all three of them. Ethan graduated from community college in May with Victoria and Maya in the audience, and the achievement felt sweeter for having people to share it with. He'd been applying to police academies, and the acceptance letter came in June from the city's main department. The academy program was intensive, 6 months of full-time training, no outside work allowed, subsistence-level stipend that wouldn't cover basic expenses. I have savings, Victoria said when Ethan showed her the letter. And before you argue, this isn't charity. This is investing in our future. You finish the academy, become a detective, build the career you've worked toward. I support us financially for 6 months, and then you're earning and we're truly partners. 6 months is a long time to be dependent. Ethan sat at their kitchen table, their kitchen, their life. You've been supporting yourself and Maya for 3 years on poverty wages while going to school. You've earned 6 months of focusing on just the academy. Victoria sat across from him. Let me do this. Not because you can't manage, but because we're a team, and teams support each other. Ethan thought about his mother's voice telling him to let people help, about promises made and the difference between accepting assistance and surrendering agency. Okay, but I'm tracking every dollar you spend on us, and once I'm working, I'm paying you back. Deal. Victoria smiled, though I reserve the right to argue about the payback part later. The academy was brutal, physically demanding, mentally exhausting, exactly as advertised. Ethan came home each night depleted, fell into bed next to Victoria, and woke to do it again. She kept their household running, got Maya to school, helped with homework, managed everything, so all he had to focus on was training. I feel like I'm taking advantage of you, he admitted one night 3 months into the academy. You're doing everything while I just show up. You're not just showing up, you're building our future. Victoria traced patterns on his chest. Besides, I like this. I like taking care of our family. It's not a burden, it's a privilege. Still feels unbalanced. Then we'll rebalance when you graduate, but for now, let it be unbalanced. Let me carry more weight while you need it. She kissed his shoulder. That's what love is. Not keeping score, but doing what needs doing. Ethan graduated from the academy in December, 6th in his class, with Victoria and Maya screaming congratulations from the audience. The badge ceremony felt surreal. Him in uniform, swearing oaths to serve and protect, officially becoming the detective he'd worked toward for 4 years. His first assignment was to a precinct on the south side working property crimes under a veteran detective named Rodriguez, who had a reputation for being tough but fair. The pay was decent, Not amazing, but combined with Victoria's income created genuine financial stability for the first time in Ethan's adult life. "I want to start paying rent," he told Victoria his first day off after starting work, contributing equally to household expenses. "Our household. And okay, if it's important to you, we can set up a joint account for expenses. We both contribute based on income percentage." Victoria pulled out her laptop, started running numbers. "You make $70,000 a year. Oh, I make approximately $8 million between salary and investment income. So proportionally, that math is insane." Ethan stopped her. "I'd contribute like 1%. Exactly. Fair based on our actual financial situations." Victoria looked up. "Or we can do 50-50 on groceries and utilities, and I cover the mortgage since I owned this place outright before you moved in. Whatever makes you feel like an equal partner." They settled on a compromise that satisfied Ethan's need to contribute without bankrupting him. He paid for groceries, utilities, and Maya's school expenses. Victoria covered the mortgage, property taxes, and major purchases. It wasn't perfectly equal, but it was honest, and that mattered more. The proposal happened on an ordinary Thursday in February, almost exactly 2 years after that first night at Mel's Diner when everything had started. Ethan planned nothing elaborate. No fancy restaurant, no public spectacle, just the three of them having dinner at home like they did most nights. Maya was in on it, having helped pick out the ring, a simple band with 3 small diamonds that hadn't required a mortgage but still represented genuine sacrifice from Ethan's savings. She could barely contain her excitement through dinner, bouncing in her seat while Ethan tried to find the right moment. "You're going to explode if you don't settle down," Victoria told Maya, amused. "What's got you so wound up?" "Daddy has something to ask you," Maya burst out, unable to hold it any longer. "It's important." Victoria looked at Ethan, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization to something that looked like joy and terror mixed together. "Does he?" Ethan pulled the ring box from his pocket, his hands remarkably steady considering his heart was trying to escape his chest. "I had a whole speech planned, but Maya kind of ruined the surprise, so I'll keep it simple." He opened the box. "Victoria Hale, will you marry me?" "Yes." Victoria didn't hesitate, didn't need the speech. "Yes, absolutely yes." Maya shrieked with excitement, launching herself at both of them while Ethan slipped the ring onto Victoria's finger. It fit perfectly, looked right there, and Ethan felt something settle into place that he hadn't realized was still floating. "I have one condition," Victoria said when Maya had calmed down enough to stop screaming. "I want to adopt Maya. Officially, legally. I want her to be mine in every way." Ethan looked at his daughter, who was nodding vigorously. "Is that what you want, baby?" "I want Victoria to be my real mom. I want us to have the same last name and be a real family." Maya's certainty was absolute. "Can we do that?" "We can absolutely do that." Ethan pulled them both close. "We'll make it official. All of it." The wedding happened in June, small and intimate at the penthouse with views of the city spread below them. Maya served as flower girl and ring bearer and general commander of ceremonies, taking her duties seriously. Ethan's few remaining friends came, Victoria's board members who'd become genuine friends, Judith and Mrs. Chen, and people who'd supported them through the hard years. Ethan wore a suit Victoria had given him as a wedding present, and she wore a dress that was elegant and simple and perfect. They wrote their own vows, and when it was Ethan's turn, he looked at the woman who'd refused to give up on him and said what he'd learned to be true. "I rejected you 3 times because I was afraid of needing someone, afraid of being saved instead of being a partner. But you taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's trust. That love isn't about keeping score or maintaining perfect equality. It's about doing what needs doing for the people you care about. You saw me at my lowest and you didn't try to fix me. You just stood beside me until I could fix myself. That's what I promise you, to stand beside you, to trust you, to let you help me when I need it, and to help you when you need it. To be your partner in everything, equal where it counts, which is in respect and honesty and commitment. I love you, and I'm going to keep loving you for the rest of my life." Victoria's vows were simpler but carried equal weight. "I love you because you made me work for it, because you saw past the money and the power and demanded I show you who I actually was. You taught me that real connection requires vulnerability, that being needed is a privilege, not a burden. I promise to respect your independence while celebrating our interdependence, to ask before assuming, to build our life together instead of building it for you. I love you exactly as you are, and I'm grateful every day that you finally said yes." When they kissed, Maya cheered loud enough that several guests laughed, and Ethan thought about the journey from that first rejection to this moment of absolute certainty. The adoption papers were finalized 3 months later in a courtroom ceremony that felt more significant than the wedding. Maya officially became Maya Cole Hale, hyphenated to honor both her mothers. The judge asked if she understood what adoption meant, and Maya explained with the seriousness of an 8-year-old that it meant Victoria was her mom forever, legally and really, and nobody could take that away. "That's exactly right," the judge said, smiling. "Welcome to your forever family." They celebrated with cake and ice cream, Maya's request, and Ethan watched his daughter with her 2 parents, one who'd given birth to her and one who'd chosen her, and felt the completeness of it. Life settled into rhythms that felt sustainable. Ethan worked cases, slowly building a reputation as a detective who actually cared about property crimes most cops considered minor. Victoria ran her company with increasing confidence, implementing ethical policies that sometimes cost profits but aligned with her values. Maya thrived in school, made friends, joined soccer and drama club, and generally lived the kind of stable childhood both her parents had fought to provide. They had movie nights and family dinners and the ordinary moments that constituted a life. They argued about discipline approaches and household responsibilities and money because marriage was complicated and merging families more so. But they talked through conflicts, compromised, chose each other repeatedly instead of just once. 5 years after the wedding, Ethan made detective sergeant, a promotion that came with a pay raise and leadership responsibilities he took seriously. He came home from his first day in the new role to find Victoria and Maya had made a banner congratulating him, hung it in their living room with so much tape it would probably damage the paint. "We're proud of you," Victoria said, wrapping her arms around him. "You worked so hard for this." "We all worked for it." Ethan looked around their home, at the life they'd built. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." "That's the point," Victoria smiled. "We're a team. We do things together." Maya, now 13 and convinced she was too old for family sentiment, still joined their hug. "Can we order pizza to celebrate? And can I pick the toppings without Dad complaining about pineapple?" "Pineapple is an abomination on pizza, and I'll die on that hill," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "But yes, you can pick toppings. It's a special occasion." That night, eating pizza and watching Maya argue passionately about why pineapple belonged on pizza while Victoria mediated, Ethan thought about the man he'd been 7 years ago. Exhausted, alone, convinced he had to carry everything himself or fail everyone he loved. That man wouldn't recognize this life, this family, this version of himself, who'd learned that strength sometimes meant accepting help, that love required vulnerability, that saying yes could be braver than saying no. He thought about his mother, wished she could have seen this, and suspected somehow she knew. She'd made him promise to let himself be happy, and he'd kept that promise in ways that terrified and fulfilled him. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, catching his expression. "How lucky I am." Ethan took her hand across the table. "How a woman walked into my bar 7 years ago and refused to take no for an answer, and I fought it every step of the way, and she stayed anyway. Of course I stayed." Victoria's smile was soft. "You were worth staying for. You still are." "We all are," Maya added, because she was 13 and needed to be part of every conversation. "We're a pretty great family." "We really are," Ethan agreed and meant it with every part of himself. Years later, when Maya graduated high school and left for college, when Ethan made lieutenant and Victoria stepped back from daily company operations to focus on the foundation, when they celebrated 20 years of marriage with the same quiet certainty they'd brought to year one, the story people told about them always started the same way. Once there was a billionaire who fell in love with a bartender, and he rejected her 3 times before finally saying yes. But that wasn't really the story. The real story was about 2 lonely people who found each other and chose, every day, to keep choosing each other, despite fear and pride and all the obstacles that should have kept them apart. The real story was about a man who learned that accepting love wasn't surrender, and a woman who learned that love meant respecting boundaries even when you could afford to break them. About a daughter who got two mothers who loved her fiercely, and a grandmother whose wisdom echoed through the family she'd helped create. The real story was simple in the end. It was about love that stayed. Through grief and growth, through struggle and success, through every ordinary day and extraordinary challenge. Love that didn't require perfection, just presence. Just showing up again and again until showing up became the foundation of everything. Ethan had rejected Victoria 3 times because he was protecting himself. But she'd stayed through those rejections, and he'd eventually let her in, and together they'd built something neither could have created alone. That was the story. Not about money or status or overcoming odds, but about two people who saw each other truly and chose each other completely. Who learned that the strongest foundations were built not on independence or dependence, but on the complicated, beautiful interdependence of genuine partnership. They chose each other in a bar, in a hospital parking lot, in quiet moments and crisis points. They chose each other when it was hard and when it was easy, when they were certain and when they were terrified. And they kept choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. That was the story. That was everything that mattered.